Welcome to the Central Church of Christ. We're glad to have you here this morning. We're studying from the book of Proverbs. Here are the announcements for the day. Evangelism Card Writing Team 3 will be meeting this evening in the library. The Wednesday evening Central Summer Series is going on now. If you'd like to host one of the speakers for dinner, you'd be welcome to sign up for that. Potter's Children's Home Silver for Children campaign is going on. And the deadline for bringing your cans back will be the middle of July. So there's still time to get one of the cans, and it's there out in the foyer if you'd like to take one of those. Last time we had a handout that we gave. If you were not here last week and you'd like to get one of those, it basically is a list of 20 themes from the book of Proverbs. I'll just place these sheets down on the front pew, and you can pick one up if you're interested. Last time we were looking at the idea of actions of the wise. We're trying to get through the prelude of this so we can begin to look at specific proverbs themselves. But in order to make some sort of pattern or order in what seems to be just chaos, one disconnected item after another throughout the book, there are certain themes that do appear where we can follow those patterns, and it kind of gives you a toehold to hang on to. We looked at actions of the wise last time. How does a wise person behave? What is their conduct like? An awful lot of the book of Proverbs is pointing that out to us. We've gotten through 3 of those, and I've got probably another 10 or so to go, and I'm going to go through these as quickly as I reasonably can. But they're key to being reminded of these things as they pop up throughout the book. And so you kind of look for these things. If you know what to look for in any of the books of the Bible, it helps your study a whole lot. It sort of gives you it's sort of like hiking, and you look for blazes on the tree, and you look for the next one, or a cairn if it's in rocky territory, or something like that. Actions of the wise. A wise person makes wisdom their best companion. Over and over again, the book of Proverbs reminds us that it's very important to hang out with the right people. I don't mean by right people what some in the world mean, somebody that can help me jump up the corporate ladder a little further or something like that. But being able to associate with people who are godly, who are encouragers to help you get along there. I know I'm full of hot air, but I've never seen like a fan's going. Whoa. Kind of discouraging right off the bat. But hanging around with people that are basically boosters to you, to help you along the path of Christianity is a real plus. And you just see that over and over and over again through the book of Proverbs. And virtually all of these concepts are echoed somewhere in the New Testament. I hesitate to do this for sake of time, but I'm not going to worry about time, honestly, too much anyhow. There is no way I'm going to go through and cover the book of Proverbs, and so that doesn't matter so much. Let's look at Ephesians 5 together. Paying attention with how you do and those around you. I think that's included in verse 15 of chapter 5. Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise. Uh, Having people around you and paying attention to the direction you're going makes a big difference. And wise people are good at doing that. A wise person knows how to accept reproof or commands. I don't know. Yeah, I probably do know about you. I start to say, I don't know about you, but I just think this is human nature. I don't like being wrong. I'm used to it, you know. And more so as I age. Maybe I just was too young and too dumb to notice all those times when I was younger, but more and more and more, I'm wrong. But that doesn't mean that I just jump up and down and say, hey, I blew another one. I'm not fond of it. I don't like reproof. Not because of the messenger. I just don't like the trouble. I don't like cleaning up messes. And I don't like cleaning up my own mess any more than I like cleaning up somebody else's. I do it routinely, but very few of us just jump for joy when we've made a mistake. And it takes extra time and effort to make it right. But a wise person knows that accepting reproof or instruction is just part of the package. And that's true again for the Old Testament and the New Testament. Proverbs are blunt, and I guess maybe that's why I like them, because they're not hateful, but they don't dress things up with pretty frills and fluff. So I'll say this as plainly as an author of Proverbs might say: you better hug people's neck that reprove you. The whole idea is to get to heaven, isn't it? Isn't that the whole point to it all? And if you're on the wrong track, you may not know it in the first place, or maybe you just need to have somebody point it out to you so that you're aware of the fact that, hey, this is a little more obvious than I realize. I need to get myself straightened out. We think we're doing a smart thing when we use that proverbial example of a child reaching out for a hot pan on the stove. We don't say, oh, honey, that's warmish. No, we say, stop. No, don't do that. Or maybe we don't. Maybe we just say, But if we do, we can be sure they're going to get burned again. If somebody reproves us, we need to accept that reproof with joy, because most people don't care enough about you to do it. And the ones who do care enough about it know they're sticking their neck out, and there's a high probability that their neck's going to get chopped. That's just the way it is. What's the modern response to reproof? Don't judge me. That's probably one of the favorite phrases of our era. I don't want to be told where I'm messing up. That's another way of expressing that. Again, I remind you, because I'm not going to let it go. I'm going to beat it to death as long as I've got breath to stand in front of a class. Judge not, lest you be not judged, is verse 1 of a chapter that, if that's all the verse you know, you need to read the rest of the chapter. I've said. Who are you to tell me what I need to do? I know what the answer to that is if they're speaking to me. Nobody. But if what I'm speaking is this, I have the authority of Almighty God in my hand. That's who I am. I'm the one who is carrying the message. Don't let the fact that somebody's likely to chop you in two keep you from trying to keep them on the right path. Again, I tell you plainly, when you see I'm messing up, come to me. I've already told you I won't be thrilled about messing up. But I'm not going to be angry at you for telling me that I've messed up. I'm not going to start trying to deflect by seeing what I can find in your life that you need to shape up. Because I don't care what it takes to get there. I want to get to heaven. And I'm figuring you do too. So let's act like it in the realm of reproof. That's a long spiel, but you're going to see reproof and accepting it properly as a theme of Proverbs. You want to grow? Listen to reproof. Pay attention to illustrations that examine right and wrong paths. A classic of that, we won't go there, but is that of the wise man and the foolish man, one building on rock and one building on sand. Guy that's building on the sand is called foolish. The word fool and foolish appears regularly throughout the book of Proverbs, and it does not mean what many of us tend to think it means. We tend to think it means somebody that's just mindless and kind of addled and doesn't have good sense. But that's really not the biblical description of a fool at all. It's a lot more serious than that. It's a lot more devious than that, and we'll get into that as we get further along. A wise person will learn from the negative as well as the positive. A wise person thinks before they act. Over and over again, the authors of Proverbs remind us, but we've got expressions like that that are our Proverbs. Haste makes waste. Look before you leap. This concept is a proverb in virtually every culture. Just think about what you're doing before you act. Did your father, since it's Father's Day, did your father ever ask you the question, what on earth were you thinking? I don't know what your answer to that was, but I had 3 pearls to share with him. I don't know. And that was a truthful answer usually. Looking back on it, I'm thinking, I don't know. Think about it before you act. Another action of a wise person is humility. They're humble. You see, I'm tempted to give you a whole long list of proverbs that match this, but we can't. I haven't got time to go there. God is always pleased when he sees this quality of humility in people. It's one of those things that he seems to prize above many other qualities. Um, take a look at Matthew with me. Go to Matthew 23 just for a little bit. We're not going to read these verses. I'm just going to ask you to kind of glance at them. And remember, when you glance at this section, you'll see that Jesus is calling out the Pharisees. And he's calling them out because of their lack of humility. They like the chief seats. They like to be something. Rabbi. They like all of that, those accolades and the attention. Some people just lap attention up like I lap up candy. They thrive on it. They've got to have it, it seems like. What's the opposite of that? In my mind, the opposite of that is the widow with the 2 mites. She didn't exactly blow trumpets and have the band play when she dropped her 2 little coins in. Isn't it interesting, though, that Jesus noticed? Do you not think that God notices those things too? He says if a sparrow falls from the sky, he notices. I honestly don't think that's hyperbole. Maybe it is to a degree. I don't know, but the point is still there. God pays attention to the small stuff. Contrary to our comment, don't sweat the small stuff. God sweats the small stuff. A wise person is humble. A wise person wins souls. Uh, let's take a look at Colossians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. You know, Adam, if you ever think it's a waste of time, and I doubt you do, but with the songs and stuff, at 83, sometimes I still have to remember what comes next. And I rattle through the verses of the song, and it gets me there. So now I'm at Colossians. Colossians 1 and verse 9. And so, from the day we heard, we have not ceased to pray for you, asking that you may be filled with the knowledge of his will in all spiritual wisdom and understanding. The whole concept. And over in 4 or 5, since you're in Colossians anyway, walk in wisdom towards outsiders, making the best use of the time. A wise person, and this may sound very similar to something we said before, but a wise person walks with wise people. I think the other is just saying, okay, have good, godly companions. But this brings it up to another level. Hang around with smart people as far as wisdom goes. Okay, that means I think in my mind, I just got a bell going off that says, remind yourself and everybody else about some fundamentals. Old does not make you wise. Multiple degrees do not make you wise. Wisdom is a whole different quality. Now, you can be old and wise. You can have multiple degrees and be wise, but they are not the thing to look for. That's why we're examining qualities of wisdom in a person's life. They're key indicators. A wise person turns away from evil. Let's look at 1 Timothy. Again, trying to give New Testament examples for some of these. Chapter 6. And verse 11. He's talked about all kinds of sins and bad things. And then in verse 11, he says, but as for you, O man of God, flee these things. All of those things that have been listed before. And then he says, as oftentimes the scriptures do, okay, don't do this. Instead, do this. That's almost a form of that Hebrew parallelism that we mentioned as a quality of the way the poetical books are frequently written anyway. Hang on in that general area and go to Ephesians 5:18. Going back a little ways. A wise person avoids alcohol. In Ephesians 5:18, And do not be filled with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit. A wise person does not allow things to interfere with their ability to think and process and make sound choices. I know this is a stretch and you're not really supposed to do that in most cases, but I think there is a principle there that would be hard to argue against. You could slip anything in there that's going to interfere with your ability to think rationally, be able to make smart choices. That would be drugs of any kind, needed or not, prescribed or not. There has to be a way to work around all that stuff. A wise person rejects fools. In Proverbs 20 and 26, you can see an example of that, but I'm not going to go there on this because it just appears so many times. We'll keep hitting it. You're over there close to 1 Timothy, though. Let's take another look in chapter 6. For the last one of these. Again, I'm not going to illustrate this by reading all of it, but in chapter 6, verses 17 and 18, he talks about how we're supposed to manage our finances and riches. And you recall the parable of the talents. Doing nothing is not acceptable. That's not acceptable either. So there's so many lessons that have been taught from the parable of the talents. I don't feel called on to try to go into all of those. But just a reminder, okay, with the list of 20 items that I gave you on the handout, and with these things describing the qualities of what a wise man is supposed to look like, let's actually get into the book itself. The Proverbs of Solomon, keeping in mind right there again that we've said Solomon's not the only author. There are others, but it's primarily Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. In the first 6 verses, there are multiple interwoven lists. I think that you should be able to rebut any line of thinking or reasoning or statement that a teacher or a preacher makes almost on the spot. Because sometimes we set up straw men, or sometimes we just basically get off track. I've heard people over and over again deride lists in the Bible as if they're almost unscriptural. Holy Spirit uses lists. An opinion? Now, opinion. I think lists are used because they make it easy for us to remember. They help us to kind of go from one item to another. I remember I'm a crammer. No, I'm not anymore because I do not take tests. But back in the days when I was a student, I crammed like crazy for exams. Now, I tried to study once I reached the stage where I cared. The preceding of that is another story we won't get into. But once I cared and started trying to make good grades again, I studied all the way through. But I crammed like crazy before the exam. And anytime I could convert something into a list, I did it. Lists are very helpful. What's confusing a little bit is these lists in these first few verses are very intertwined. For example, there are 4 attributes of wisdom, as I see it, in these first few verses. Wise dealing, I'm not going to comment on that. I think we can figure out what wise dealing is. I'll choose most instances just to say it and then move on. A second one, righteousness. A third one, justice. A fourth one, equity. A wise man, to just sum it up in simple language that I understand, a wise man is always trying to do the right thing, making an effort at it. Boy, what a contrast with some of the world. Here's another list. What do we want to know? To know A, wisdom. Well, yeah, Ron, you've been talking about wisdom now for 2.5 class periods and more to go. Okay, to know wisdom, all right? To know instruction. Separate word must be a somewhat different subject, even though it's related. Wisdom, instruction, and C, words of insight. That word insight shows up a fair amount in the book of Proverbs. It's not just having a database of information or knowledge. A person who is wise is juggling more balls in the air than we can really understand. They're seeing situations and circumstances. Isn't it brilliant? Sometimes I just marvel at some examples in the Bible. They amaze me. And we've heard them so often, I'm afraid we take them for granted, and we don't see the beauty of it. Of what astonishing wisdom. That's my baby. No, that's my baby. Cut the baby in half and eat. Wow. Now that's all three of these qualities rolled up into one as by way of illustration. He knew that the real mama wasn't going to let that happen. Man, to have wisdom like that, that's impressive. He didn't say, I'll retire into my chambers, and over the weekend, I will consider this. And the first of the week, I will render my verdict. On the spot, he sees what's happened. He responds to it perfectly. I'm not suggesting that we can always do that, but I'm suggesting that it's possible to a higher degree than most of us allow ourselves to, because first place, we don't ask for wisdom, and the second place, we don't seek wisdom. And woe be to you, this old man says, if you deride something like wisdom. Well, I don't need no highfalutin stuff like that. The Lord rebuke you. So we've got a couple of lists there right off the bat. Skip on down to the latter part of this section, verse 5. 3 things. Let the wise hear. Let the wise increase in learning. And 3, let them obtain guidance. Which is to say, a wise person continues to grow. They don't just sit back and fold their hands and say, in some areas of my life, I've been very tempted to do this, so I know the language. It's a language I speak somewhat at least, some days fluently. It's tempting to say, okay, you're old, There's a lot of things you can't do anymore. You know, I watered flowers yesterday for my neighbors. You know, at least the Vaughns had the consideration to stay home so I didn't have to water their flowers. But a lot of my other neighbors decided to get out of Dodge, and they had a lot of flowers, and I volunteered to water their flowers as well as mine. Watering flowers is about my speed. I don't mow yards anymore. I don't do the weed eating. I don't do the lifting. I don't do all that stuff. Bluntly put, I can't, but I can water. I can stand there with a hose. I can do that. It's tempted to do nothing but, and least of all, strive to grow. Why bother to grow, Ron? You're at the end of the road anyway. True. If I live to be 100, which is improbable, I've got 17 years. 17 years sounds like a lifetime. And when you're 20, when you're 83, you figure that new car I got is very likely my last new car. Because I'm the kind of guy that keeps one forever. I don't need any more shoes. I got all the shoes I need to take me where I want to go. You begin to look at things through that perspective, and you can stagnate and not grow if you're not careful. Do you see this progression here? This person is climbing to a new level. They're not satisfied with where they are. To understand proverb and saying, the words of the wise, and hear their riddles, this person is constantly thinking. To me, the great tragedy of all physical tragedies, as awful as physical ailments are, and I've led a sheltered life, so I cannot speak to this like many of you can. But how much more tragic to lose your mental capabilities? And some of us see that. Some of us experience it with our friends and our family. Linda was ministering to such a one this week, and I asked for the report when she got home. And I made some observation. Well, maybe she's not aware anymore, because you can finally reach the stage where you're just, okay, you don't really know. Tragically, she knows. I can't remember this. I don't need to do this. I don't need to drive because I might get out there and I might not ever figure out how to get back. We need to be able to move forward. Here is the theme of the entire book. In verse 7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. If you haven't really started deliberately on your journey to wisdom, there's the starting place. Fear the Lord. That word fear, by the way, carries with it two aspects. One of it is like the concept of terror. Sometimes take a look at what happens to good men, powerful men, godly men, when they're in the presence of God. I think of Isaiah. Woe is me. I got no business being here. Over and over and over again, you see that response, that godly fear. But also, weirdly enough, juxtaposed with that is the concept of awe. We wander through the neighborhood, or we did until the heat came along, and that means, thank goodness for gyms and treadmills. But we've got a fairly pretty neighborhood, I think. A lot of people have flowers, and in lots of times we'll stop and take pictures of a particular bloom or flower or something. How can you not be in awe of the God who made that? How can you not look at the sky during the daytime, or more especially the night? And it doesn't have to be the aurora borealis. I'm not fond of storms that are severe by any means, but just all of nature. Get your grandchild's book that you are reading to them from that have the animals in them. And I'm thinking, Lord, if there is such a smile as a part of your disposition, because I know that you do have an aspect of that in your disposition, even as I understand it, it must have made you smile to make a giraffe and a hippopotamus. We need to be in awe of God's creation. The whole concept of Proverbs is summed up in this verse. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. You notice it doesn't say that they ignore it. This is visceral. You know, a lot of the reactions that I see, and I try to avoid it, Sam. I don't want to get into that media stuff and all that. That's very upsetting. But when I'm flipping through a few of the news feeds that I read online, that's the only place I'll do it because I can flip the page real quick. A lot of the comments about people that disagree with other people, those comments are visceral. It's not, well, let's discuss that. You present your arguments and I'll present mine. And we may come to no agreement, but at least we will have made each other think. No, it's like, I hate you. Well, guess what? I hate you more. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Only it's nastier than that, isn't it? But it's pure hatred. Fools feel this way, this visceral feeling towards the idea of knowledge and instruction. It's time for a definition of fool, and I don't want to go over it and over it as we go through. So just kind of bear with me, and this is as I used to say in ancient days of radio, which a few of you will recognize, this is a one-time and one-time only offer. So here goes. Fools are called that not because they don't have any mental capacity and they can't be shrewd, they can't analyze, they can't think. They are called that because they are immoral, first of all. Immorality is the premier quality of the Bible fool. They're called that because they lack understanding. No wonder they lack understanding because they despise it. They don't store up knowledge. They fail to obtain wisdom. They refuse correction. They're arrogant. They talk loosely. They're contentious. And they despise wisdom. That's what a fool is, biblically. Do those qualities not tell us how dangerous it is to be around them? To have any of those qualities as a part of our existence? Some of them may seem kind of innocent. They're far from it. Loose talk. No, that's not too bad, you know. It destroys people's lives, oftentimes. It ruins relationships forever. Contentious. Well, that's not all that bad. Some people just love to cram their viewpoint down other people's throats. They're going to argue and argue and argue over something that's opinion. But for them, it's not opinion. It's chiseled in stone right under the Ten Commandments. Such people are foolish. At least according to Proverbs 20 and verse 3. Every one of these has a reference to go with them. If you're a marker, I suggest, if you haven't already, that you mark verse 7, because it is the theme verse of the entire book of Proverbs. And doesn't it remind you a little bit of Solomon's words at the end of Ecclesiastes? I've tried it all. Here's the bottom line. Fear God. Keep His commandments. And these things, for those of you who are wise, just link together. Because then that makes you think about, if you love me, you won't come hug my neck. You won't say, oh, I've just got this positive, warm feeling towards you. No, it's much harder than that. It's so much harder than that. If you love me, you'll keep my commandments. Boy, I have a hard time with that part. If it just, do you love? I love Jesus. I think I can say that without sarcasm or anything or trying to distort it. But I don't always act like it because I don't always keep His commandments. Here is the goal from your teacher's point of view. There are younger and better teachers. But if you haven't gotten a little wiser each one of these sessions, it's partly on my shoulders. It's also partly on yours. Because I'm not the greatest of the great of teachers for sure. But I have the best material that there is. So you better be getting wiser. Thanks for your attention.